On a quiet autumn evening, I received an invitation from my good friend David to spend the weekend at his home. David's home is located in the suburbs and is a place full of warmth and tranquility. This time I was particularly looking forward to it, because their home has a new facility that I have never tried before, an outdoor hot spring. I was full of curiosity about hot springs and full of anticipation for the upcoming relaxing time. When I arrived at David's house, he greeted me warmly and told me that he needed to go out to deal with some urgent matters, but encouraged me to enjoy the hot spring first. He also mentioned that if his mother Emily was there, she would show me how to use the hot spring. I was a little surprised that David left, but also felt warm by his trust. On the way to the hot spring I met Emily. She always greeted me with her signature warm smile, and asked if I planned to try the newly installed hot spring. I nodded and told her that David had allowed me to experience it first. Emily's eyes flickered with a friendly light, and she offered to teach me how to enjoy the hot spring properly. Emily led me to the hot spring area in the backyard, where there was a beautifully designed hot spring pool. She explained in detail how to adjust the water temperature, maintained proper hydration, and how to make the most of the healing properties of the hot springs. Her voice was soft and calm, and I felt an inexplicable sense of peace of mind. With her guidance, I learned how to enjoy the hot springs properly. After Emily left, I was left alone in the hot springs, enjoying the warmth of the water and the tranquility of the surroundings. Soon I heard light footsteps and Emily reappeared, asking if I was okay. I assured her that I was enjoying the moment very much. She smiled as she walked into the hot springs, took the empty seat next to me, and asked if I minded her joining. Her tone was casual, but there was something mischievous in her eyes that made my heart beat faster. I nodded, trying to stay calm, but I felt a rush of adrenaline inside. She sat close, maybe a little too close, but I didn't mind. The heat made everything hazy, as if we were in our own little world. We chatted for a while, talking about the stress of life, work and school. Nothing in particular. The conversation flowed smoothly, but there was an undercurrent of tension, an unspoken attraction boiling under the surface. At one point, Emily placed her hand on my arm, just for a moment, her touch so soft, almost gentle, that I found myself leaning in slightly, drawn to her in a way I couldn't quite explain. Of course she noticed. Her lips curved into a subtle smile. "You are nervous," she whispered, her fingers lightly brushing against my skin. "You should let yourself relax." Her voice was soothing, almost hypnotic, and I felt myself melting into the heat, melting into her presence. I could feel my heartbeat quicken, my pulse quickening as she moved closer to me. It was as if the outside world no longer existed, as if it was just the two of us in this steamy, intimate space. I looked into her eyes and saw something I hadn't noticed before, maybe lust, maybe even desire. My breath caught in my throat as she slowly slid her hand higher and rested it on my thigh. "Sometimes it can get lonely here in the cabin, especially when David's dad is away on a work trip," she whispered, her eyes never leaving mine, and I could feel my resolve beginning to slip. I knew this was wrong on so many levels. David was my best friend and this was his mom, but there was something about the way she looked at me, the sign she gave me that she wanted me to satisfy her, the way her fingers brushed against my skin, that took my mind off of thinking. I could feel my pulse quickening. Her hands continued to move. Her touch was flirtatious. "Emily," my voice was hoarse, but she hushed me with a soft shush, and pressed a finger to my lips. She whispered, "Don't say anything," and then leaned in so close that I could feel her breath on my skin. Her lips pressed against mine, warm and soft, with a slight taste of the wine she had drunk earlier. The kiss was slow and deliberate, and I found myself melting into it. Her hands reached inside my panties, and she rubbed my rod, making it so hard. Her body pressed against me, in a way that made me forget everything else. I lost control and started to take off her towel. Her apples were perfectly shaped, and I wanted to suck them, and I did for at least 10 minutes. She really was enjoying how I was sucking her. She took control of me, holding my rod and inserting it into her cavern. She began to ride me as if I were the horse, and she was out of her control. My hands were on her hips, since she was enjoying the ride. I'm not sure how long we stayed like that, lost in the moment, but time seemed to blur as the heat of the sauna enveloped us. All I knew was that I couldn't stop kissing her, couldn't stop moving my hands to explore her body, teasing every touch, every sigh, every sound she made that gave me unexpected pleasure. After we finished, she looked at me with a mischievous smile, her fingers gently tracing the outline of my jaw. "We probably shouldn't stay here too long," she whispered, even though her actions told a different story. "I think we still have a little time." I knew what she meant, and as much as I wanted to resist, I couldn't. There was something magnetic about her, something that drew me in, despite all the reasons I should back off. I could feel her hands on my breast, sliding down my arms, and her touch lit a fire inside me that matched the heat of the sauna. There was no going back now, no way to stop the inevitable. As we lost ourselves in each other in that moment, the outside world completely disappeared. The only thing that mattered was how her body pressed against mine, how her lips moved with mine, how everything felt so right yet so unexpected. For the next few minutes, we sat in a haze of heat and desire, our bodies tangled together, boundaries blurred, nothing in that moment, other than the two of us, and the overwhelming need to continue exploring this relationship. Finally, Emily broke the silence again, her voice soft but firm, that we should leave before David came for us. Her words suddenly brought reality home to me. David, my best friend. What was I doing? But as she stood up, adjusted her towel, and gave me one last lingering look, I knew this would not be the end. There was something between us now that neither of us could ignore. We returned to the house in silence, with mixed emotions in our hearts. This autumn night trip to the hot springs was not only a physical relaxation for me, but more importantly, it established a new connection between me and Emily. Although we knew that this experience might bring some complicated consequences, we could not deny that this night had changed us. As Emily reminded us, our steps became hurried, but the emotions in our hearts became heavier. I tried to sort out my thoughts, but the confusion in my heart was like a tangled ball of thread, difficult to untie. David, my best friend, how could I betray him? However, Emily's gaze, her warmth, everything about her, left an indelible mark in my heart. We walked through the corridor, and every step seemed to be a struggle with our conscience. I felt guilty, but at the same time, there was an indescribable excitement. This contradictory emotion almost suffocated me. Emily seemed to feel this tension, and she looked back at me from time to time, her eyes full of complex emotions. Back in the house, we tried to act as if nothing had happened, but there was an indescribable tension in the air. David noticed our expressions, but he just smiled and asked if we enjoyed the hot spring. I forced a smile and nodded, and Emily quickly changed the subject. It was late at night and we each returned to our rooms. I lay in bed tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. My mind replayed every moment with Emily, her every smile, every touch. I knew that these memories would become a secret in my heart forever, a sweet and painful secret. The next day we spent it together as usual, but I knew that everything had changed. There was a new tacit understanding between Emily and me, an unspoken connection. Our eye contact was full of new meaning, and our conversations were more profound. When we said goodbye, David hugged me and thanked me for spending the weekend with him. I hugged him back tightly, feeling guilty, and when Emily hugged me, I felt an unprecedented tension and anticipation. She whispered in my ear, "This is not the end. It's just the beginning." I watched her leave, my heart full of uncertainty. I knew that this trip to the hot springs was not just a simple trip. It started a new journey, a journey that might change the fate of all of us, and I could only go with the flow and see where fate would take us.